I'm 17 and I grew up in one of those neighborhoods where everybody kind of knows everybody and nothing really happens. Cookie cutter houses really, and matching mailboxes, and a park at the end of the block that little kids use during the day and older kids take over at night. I'd grown up on that street my whole life and never once felt unsafe on it. But that changed pretty fast one night last October. My parents had gone to dinner with some people from my dad's work, and my little sister was sleeping over at a friend's place. I had the house to myself, which was pretty rare, and I wasn't doing anything special with it. Just hanging out, ordered a pizza, and playing some games. Normal Friday stuff. My friend group had a habit of meeting up at the park down the street on weekend nights. Nothing wild, just sitting around the equipment talking. Sometimes somebody would bring a speaker. I got a text from my friend Theo around 10 asking if I was coming though. I told him I'd be down in a bit. I left the house around 10:30. The walk to the park was maybe 4 minutes or so. I'd done it hundreds of times. It was cold out, so I had my hood up and my hands in my pockets. And I was just kind of moving on autopilot, not paying much attention to anything. About halfway there, I noticed the old Mercer house. It had been empty for about a year after the family moved out. One of those places that go from normal looking to slightly wrong pretty fast once nobody's maintaining them. Grass overgrown, one shutter hanging off, and newspaper piled on the porch that nobody ever collected. I noticed a light on inside. I slowed down without fully stopping. It was a dim light, like a flashlight or a phone screen moving around inside. I stood there for a second just staring at it. My first thought was that maybe new owners had finally moved in and were doing a walkthrough. But it was 10:30 on a Friday night and the light was moving in a weird way, sweeping from corner to corner like whoever was holding it was looking for something specific. I kept walking, told myself it wasn't my problem. I got to the park and found Theo and two other guys, Brennan and a kid named Sully, who I didn't know that well but had hung around a few times. They had a speaker going low and were just sitting on the picnic table near the swings. I sat down and joined the conversation, and after a few minutes mentioned the light I'd seen in the Mercer house. Theo immediately wanted to go look. That was just how he was. Brennan was into before. I even finished my sentence. Sully shrugged and said sure. I was the only one who hesitated, and I got outvoted before I even made a case for staying put. We walked back down the street toward the house. I want to be clear that in the moment this felt like a dumb but harmless adventure. 4 guys are going to peek at an abandoned house that probably just had some kids messing around in it. I wasn't feeling any real dread at that point. That came later. We came up on the house from the side, cutting across the neighbor's yard to get to the fence line. Theo peeked around the corner first. The light was still moving inside. He waved us forward, and we crouched along the side of the house toward the back where one of the windows was sitting slightly open. Theo got up to the window first and looked in. He immediately pulled back and turned to us, and his whole expression had shifted. He wasn't excited anymore. He grabbed my arm and started pulling me back, the way we came, and just said quietly that we needed to leave right now. That was enough for me. We all moved back across the yard quickly without saying a word. Once we got to the sidewalk, Theo said what he saw. There were 2 men inside. Adults, definitely not teenagers. One of them was using a flashlight to go through the kitchen cabinets and drawers, emptying stuff out. The other was dragging something heavy across the floor toward the back door. Something heavy was wrapped in a tarp. None of us said anything for a few seconds. Then Brennan said what all of us were thinking, that we needed to call the police right now and we needed to get away from this house before we ever see those men and they come out back and see us. We moved fast down the street away from the house. I called the police while we walked and kept my voice as low as I could. The dispatcher asked me a lot of questions I didn't have answers to, like how many people, and I said that we could see 2. And what did they look like? I said I hadn't actually seen them myself, only Theo had. She told us to keep moving away from the property and to not go back under any circumstances, and that officers were on the way. We ended up cutting through to the next street over and standing under a light post near somebody's driveway. Theo was weirdly quiet. I kept asking him if he was okay, and he just kept nodding without really looking at me. I think seeing it close hit him differently than the rest of us. We heard sirens maybe 5 minutes later. 2 squad cars came up the main street, and a third came around the back. We stayed where we were like the dispatcher told us to. An officer found us about 10 minutes after that. He'd been going door to door on the surrounding street looking for whoever called it in. We told him everything, where we were standing, what Theo had seen, the open window, the flashlight, and the tarp. He had specifically asked Theo about the tarp. Theo described it again. The officer's face didn't give anything away, but he thanked us and told us to go straight home and that somebody would be in touch with our parents. I went home and sat on the couch and stared at the wall for a while. My mom called about an hour later, long before my parents got home. An officer had already contacted her. She was upset that I'd been near the property at all, which I understood. But once she heard the whole story, she calmed down and just kept saying she was glad we were safe. The full picture came out over the following days in bits and pieces, the way things do in a small neighborhood. The two men had broken into the Mercer house, using it as a temporary location to move stolen property. They'd been using empty houses around the county for months, rotating spots. The tarp Theo saw being dragged contained electronics and other valuables taken from a house 2 towns over that had been burglarized earlier that same night. Both men were caught. One was picked up leaving the property when officers moved in from the back. The other tried to make a run for it, maybe 2 blocks before he was stopped. I don't think about it often anymore, but every once in a while it comes back to me. Specifically the part where I almost just kept walking when I saw that light. I was 2 seconds from just putting my head down and going into the park, and forgetting about it entirely. Then sometimes I think about the other version of that night, the one where we didn't leave when Theo said to, where we stayed at the window a little bit longer, or where one of those men happened to come out the back and found 4 teenagers crouched in the dark looking at them. I think about that version more than I probably should. Those weren't people who were going to politely ask us to leave. They were adults in the middle of something serious who probably couldn't afford witnesses. We were 4 kids who had no idea what we'd actually stumbled into until it was almost too late to matter. Theo doesn't talk about it, not even with us. The few times I've brought it up, he just kind of shuts down and changes the subject. I think whatever he saw through that window in those 2 or 3 seconds before he pulled back affected him in a way he hasn't fully worked through yet. I don't push it, because I get it. We were just 4 guys who were bored on a Friday night and made a stupid decision that almost turned into something none of us were ready for. We got lucky in my eyes. Timing was right. The window was far enough from where the men were standing, and we moved fast enough. A few seconds different in any direction, and I genuinely don't know how that night ends. I still walk past that house sometimes. It sold recently and a new family moved in. Fresh paint with new shutters and the porch cleaned up now. It looks completely normal. From the outside, you never know anything happened there. I don't really know where to begin, but I suppose it started before I was born. My birth set in motion a series of actions that led to the threat of my life beyond my control. So before my existence, my mom, Jane, dated an older guy called James when she was in her mid-teens. He adored her, but wasn't of the same religion as her, so she ended up marrying a gentleman from her congregation instead, leaving James rather put out. A year after being married, Jane birthed me, and decided that she was unhappy with my father Dave and contacted James with intent to go back with him. So Jane packed a bag one night, took me and left. As soon as she arrived at James' house, she was bombarded with messages from Dave telling her that he would take full custody of me if she didn't return. So with a heavy heart, she chose me over James, and there lies my problem. She went back to my father, and after another year of failed attempts, they divorced, and my mom moved south to be with my family, completely forgetting about James. My childhood was fairly normal for the next 13 years. A few house moves, a new stepdad, and a few siblings. Mother's second marriage falls through, and she's single again. The year is 2010, and she has just discovered Facebook. Being newly single and having some contact with all of her old school friends, she quickly strikes up a few romances out of nostalgia. But nothing sticks, though, until she finds him. James has a Facebook account. Not very active and no profile picture, but Mom is sure it is him and immediately falls in love again. He comes down south and meets us kids and stays for my 16th birthday party. Looks-wise, he's easily in his 50s with shaved gray hair, balding on top, glasses, and a creepy-ass smile. So far, not too bad. So why am I posting here? How does this involve me and not wanting to meet this guy again? Well, when my mom leaves him a 3rd time, he finally flips and the crazy comes out to play. He starts turning up at the house uninvited. He is told to leave every time. The visits become less frequent and we think maybe he's got the message. But then hand-delivered letters start arriving from my mom, and it's the contents of these letters that cause me alarm. In them, he details how if she had never met my father, they could have been very happy together, and he had a plan to get her back that was ruined by the untimely arrival of me. So he did what any crazy man would do and started plotting to get me out of the picture. After all, I'm the reason she went back to Dave, wasn't I? Back in 1995, she had a near miss of a car accident, with baby me in the car. When a car clipped her at a junction, she didn't get the car's details but put it down to chance. In the letters, James tells her that the incident 15 years ago was him and that he won't miss this time. He informs her that he still believes that there is a chance for them, but only with me out of the picture. I'm not a baby anymore. My father is well and truly out of the picture, but the crazy in James' brain won't let it go. The next letter informs my mother that he has told social services that she is a drunk and they will come and take me away. It's not hard to prove that false, so we don't panic. The next letter tells her that he will burn the house down if he can't have her. Nobody else will. This one she takes to the police. Upon investigation, it's revealed that an ex of James, with the same first name as my mom, has a restraining order against him for stalking and attempted arson. We are put on high alert and the process for a restraining order has begun. A few nights later, my mom hears somebody outside the house. Thinking it's him, she calls the police and they arrive within 5 minutes and search the street. Not James, but his car is found behind the resident garages. He doesn't return to it that night. The next day, the police contact a women's hostel in a neighboring county. They have a room spare, so we pack our bags and head there. And so that summer of my life was spent in hiding, with no friends and no social media. Well, I wasn't supposed to have social media, but using proxy servers on the computer in the teens' rec room. I was the only teen in the hostel at this point. It was easy, and possibly very stupid. James began messaging me through my Facebook, playing nice, telling me how much he loved me and my mom and needed to know that she was okay. I ignored him and blocked the account. I had a number of fake accounts try to befriend me, and they were all blocked also. After 3 months, they find us a new house. We have a week to go back and pack up our old lives. So that's what we do. And now it's 8 years later, and I've moved several times since, including for uni, and honestly haven't given much thought to the man who wanted to kill me so he could be with my mom. 2 years ago, I moved back up north, not far from my birthplace. 2 weeks ago, I received an email of an old email account for a rental agreement. At first, I thought it was spam, but upon opening it, the name at the top read, "To James Smith," and the rental address was not too far from me, only a town away. That sicko gave my email to the renters at his so that I would know he was nearby. I've heard nothing else, but I seriously hope I never have to see him again. I'm 24 and I was spending my first summer home after dropping out earlier that year. My parents were away visiting family out of state and had been gone for about a week already. I had the whole house to myself, which honestly felt amazing at first. No schedule and no obligations, just completely winding down from what had been a pretty rough stretch of my life. I'd been gaming, watching stuff, and sleeping in. Nothing crazy. My girlfriend Ren and I had been together about 8 months at that point. Things were good between us, or at least I thought they were. She worked a summer job across town and we text throughout the day pretty regularly. That week had been a little quieter than the usual between us, but I didn't read into it. I figured she was just tired from work. I definitely was not expecting her to show up at my door at 11 on a Friday night. I heard a knock and just kind of froze for a second because I wasn't expecting anybody. I went to the door and opened it, and there she was. She had her hair down and was wearing a hoodie even though it was warm out. My first instinct was to smile because I was genuinely happy to see her. But something stopped me almost immediately. She wasn't smiling back. She looked at me in this way that I can only describe as studied. She was reading my face very carefully before deciding anything. I asked her what was going on and she said she just wanted to talk. I stepped aside and let her in. She walked past me without making eye contact and sat down at the kitchen table. Not the couch, not anywhere comfortable. The kitchen table. Like she'd come to have a meeting. I sat across from her and asked her if everything was okay. Then she asked me who Kelsey was. I actually had to think about that for a second because the name didn't immediately mean anything to me. Then I remembered. I knew a Kelsey from one of my old classes. We'd worked on a group project together back in the spring and had grabbed coffee once to go over some notes. That was genuinely the extent of it. Hadn't spoken to her in months probably. I told Ren exactly that. Kept my voice calm because I could already feel where this was going and I didn't want to make it worse. I told her that she was just somebody from school, that we did a project together and that nothing happened. Ren nodded slowly. Not the nod of somebody who believes you, but the nod of someone deciding whether to keep pushing. She pulled out her phone and slid it across the table toward me. It was a screenshot of an Instagram story. Kelsey had posted a throwback photo from a coffee shop and it tagged our schools in it. Somebody had clearly sent it to Ren with the context that wasn't even there. because the photo was just two people sitting at a table with drinks. You couldn't even see faces clearly. But someone had apparently told Ren it was me and that we were together and that it was recent. I explained everything again. I showed her my messages, my camera roll, anything I could think of that would fill in the actual picture. She went quiet for a long time after that. I thought she was processing it, maybe coming down from whatever worked her up enough to drive across town at 11 at night. But then she got up from the table. She walked to the kitchen counter with her back to me and just stood there. I asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. I got up and took a few steps toward her and asked again. When she turned around, she was holding one of the kitchen knives. My brain did not process this immediately. There was this gap of maybe 2 or 3 full seconds where I just stared at it and didn't move because it didn't compute. She wasn't waving it around or screaming, just holding it at her side and looking at me with this expression I had never seen on her face before, completely flat and calm. I took a step back and put my hands up and told her to put it down. I said it pretty calmly for how bad I was panicking inside. My legs were already shifting my weight toward the hallway without me consciously deciding to move. She told me she knew what I did and that she wasn't stupid, that she had given me a chance to just tell the truth and I hadn't taken it. I told her I had told her the truth, and I kept saying it. I told her there was nothing to confess because nothing happened. I was backing up slowly the whole time, trying to create distance without making any sudden movement that might change the energy in the room. She followed me, not rushing, just matching my pace. The calmness of it made my skin crawl in a way I can't fully describe. I made it to the hallway and she was still coming. I turned and ran for the front door. Her footsteps picked up behind me. I got the door open and got outside and just ran down the driveway toward the street. I didn't have my phone or my shoes. I just ran. I got to the neighbor's house 3 doors down and banged on the door until their porch light came on. I was out of breath and shaking by the time they opened it. I told them to call the police, and I think the look on my face was enough because they didn't ask any questions. Officers showed up in a few minutes, and when they went inside, Ren was sitting back at the kitchen table. The knife was on the counter, and she was completely calm when they spoke to her, like a totally different person from the one who had just followed me down the hallway with a knife. She was taken in that night. I found out later that she'd been dealing with some things mentally that I genuinely had no idea about. The person who sent her that screenshot had done it deliberately to set her off. Somebody who apparently had their own issues with her. It was all built on something that wasn't real. I don't really know how to feel about it now. Part of me feels bad for her, but I also can't get that expression out of my head. The one she had when she turned around from the counter. I've known Ren for over 2 years now, and I had never once seen anything close to that look on her face. And I really don't want to ever again. "17 or so years ago, I worked IT for the large local hospital in my city. We also provided IT services to 7 other smaller hospitals and towns across the whole of our county and the neighboring county. My job was to build, install, and fix computers and provide support, in person and via phone and email, to our 6,000 users. It was an incredibly stressful job, made even worse because I was the only person on the IT staff who lived in the city where the main hospital was located, so I was often on call after business hours too. When I began there, I was straight out of university and very young, as I had graduated high school much younger than most kids do. I am also pretty shy and rather anxious. While I was unquestionably geeky and awkward, I am autistic with high-functioning autism, so my social awareness and skills are rather poor, and I find social contact of any sort intensely uncomfortable. Remember this, as it has bearing on what happened. I was still young and reasonably cute. I would never have been called beautiful, as I was plain and a little bit overweight, but I was cute. I dress in loose, baggy masculine clothing and do not wear makeup at all, despite being a woman, and I have sensory problems that make fitted clothing and the oily feel and scent of cosmetics very hard to tolerate. So not exactly a runway model. I was in my very early 20s when this happened, but my shyness and immature social skills made me seem more like a young teen than an adult. I also consider myself asexual, somebody who does not experience attraction or sexual needs, so I choose not to date. The hospital where I worked was going through some repairs and upgrades, one of these being the replacement of the antiquated HVAC system in the main building on the hospital campus. They brought in a major company to assess the hospital's needs, choose an appropriate system, and install it. This meant that one of the representatives from that company would be present at the hospital daily. He was given an office beside that belonging to the head of the hospital maintenance, and I was directed to get him a computer and set him up on the network. When I got to his office and began installing the computer, things started getting weird. This was the first time I had ever met the man, who I will call Andrew here, for the sake of my own safety and privacy. This guy was at least 20 years older than me. Rather reedy looking, due to being very tall and quite thin, and was very average in appearance. Your typical, forgettable, and middle-aged man, but he would not take his eyes off me. Being autistic, I am naturally very uncomfortable with eye contact, especially the prolonged sort, and this man was just openly staring at me as I worked. He introduced himself as Andrew X, and began asking me innocent work-related questions, but these soon morphed into very personal inquiries that had nothing to do with work, like asking where I lived, whether I had a boyfriend, that sort of thing. I told him that I lived in the same city as the hospital, but not exactly where, as I actually lived right across the road from the hospital and didn't want him knowing that. I lied and told him that I had a long-term boyfriend too. Any question that veered in the direction of dating or romance got a curt, uninviting, bald-faced lie as an answer. I was getting very uncomfortable at this point, but I didn't react as I would now. Nowadays, I would tell the guy asking that sort of question that it was none of his damn business and inform him that he was being inappropriate and I wanted it to stop or I would complain to HR. But back then, I was uncertain, petrified of confrontation, and afraid to make any sort of complaint about anything, so I just kept working. I ended up having to sit down at his desk to install the correct software accesses, and while I was seated, he walked up right behind me. I thought, he's just watching what I'm doing to access the programs he needs. No, he put his hands on my shoulder and began to massage. I froze, stiffening up. "You're stiff as a board," he said as he kept kneading my shoulders. "It's full of knots." Yeah, well, if I hadn't already been tense and bothered by his intrusive questions, I most certainly was after he began touching me. It is very common for autistic people to deeply dislike being touched. I tried to squirm out of his grasp, afraid to tell him to stop directly as we were in a rather secluded, untraveled part of the hospital's basement, and I was afraid to make a scene and anger him. I hurried through getting everything done, told him to call our help desk if he needed any other help, and practically ran out of his office. I should have told HR right then and there, but I didn't. It was creepy, yeah, but I didn't think HR would be any help. It was so borderline, I thought, just treading the edge of inappropriate. I did tell my boss that Andrew made me uncomfortable, but my boss forgot about it almost immediately. Fast forward a couple of weeks, I was working in the medical imaging department, installing some terminals in the CT scan suite. I was visible from the hallway. Andrew passed, walking with two men from the building maintenance. As soon as he saw me, he began loudly telling his companions that I was cute, pretty, beautiful, and smart, laying it on thick. He walked past me again, loudly praising me and saying he wanted to date me every time he went by. The two men he was with knew me a little bit, and I could tell that they were bothered and embarrassed by this guy's inappropriate behavior. Finally, I finished up and ran back to the safety of my own department. Another week passed, and I was heading home late. I was using the underground tunnel between the main building and a smaller one used for solely administrative offices. It's a long tunnel, passing below a busy road, and I often took this route going home as the smaller building was very close to my apartment complex. I heard somebody call my name and turned to find Andrew hurrying to catch up to me. It was after hours, and the corridor was otherwise totally empty. I did not want him finding out that I lived right beside the hospital. I turned and ran, hearing him call my name over and over again. Being younger, I was faster, and I managed to find a good hiding spot inside the administrative building without him knowing where I'd gone. I had hidden myself in a network hub closet, behind the tall rack of networking equipment. I had locked the door behind me, thankfully, as I heard him walk up that hallway, trying the doorknobs of locked offices, calling my name as he proceeded. He jiggled the doorknob on the door of the hub closet as he went by. I remained there, silent and still, long after I heard his last yell. After I was sure he had gone, I snuck out and raced home. Things calmed down for a bit after that. A few months went by without me having any contact with him, though I still saw him around the halls of the hospital more often than I thought I should. I vaguely wondered if he was trying to follow me, but there was nothing conclusive enough to prove it one way or the other. Then came the scariest part. I was working in a part of the hospital that had been patient rooms, but was being remade into offices. I had to pull network drops into these offices to allow computers to access the network. I lost track of time while I worked, and the other people working there with me, the painters and the men setting up the new desks, went home without me noticing. Eventually, I was completely alone. When I happened to notice my watch, it was almost 6:30 in the evening. I usually left at 5:30. I packed up my tools and left the room where I had been working. Stepped out into the long hallway, tired and thinking about what I would make for dinner. I hadn't gone very far when I heard footsteps approaching and looked up. There was Andrew, hurriedly walking towards me. I hoped that if I switched to the other side of the hallway, he'd rush on past, as he did seem to be hurrying. No such luck. He veered over to me, grabbed me hard by my biceps, and forced me up against the wall. He then proceeded to pin me there with his body while he groped my breast hard, easily pushing away my hands as I punched and slapped, trying to get him off me. For a thin man, he was surprisingly strong. He leaned down so that his face was close to mine, and I thought in horror, "Oh, he's going to kiss me." So I twisted my neck and turned my face far from his nasty breath as was possible. Instead, he growled into my ear. Normal girls like it when a guy wants them. Normal girls let guys date them. All the while I was yelling no repeatedly. Finally, my brain got itself out of freeze mode and I became angry. I shoved him hard, and once I had enough space to make the move, I kneed him hard in the balls. He doubled over, wheezing and moaning. I ran and locked myself into one of the rooms I had been working in. The doors were solid hard wood and the locks were strong, so I knew I'd be safe despite him starting to pound and kick the door. Only one problem. I had no way to call for help. I didn't carry the on-call phone during the day, didn't own my own mobile phone, and back then mobile phones were not allowed inside hospitals anyway. And none of the rooms that were being renovated into office had telephones installed yet. I was trapped, and my only way to call for help would be opening the window and yelling out. Meanwhile, Andrew continued pounding and kicking the door, screaming insults, all kind of profanities. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and then he was still beating and batting the door, slamming hard against it with his full weight. I began to fear that I might be trapped there all night, with him on the other side of the door trying to break it. I don't know what finally made him give up. Maybe he heard somebody approaching or something. Suddenly, the yelling and banging at the door stopped completely, and I was left in breathless silence. I remained there listening at the door, trying to detect the telltale rustle of clothing or squeak of a shoe that would tell me he was still there waiting for me to open it. Nothing. Just sweet, lovely, safe silence. I slowly undid the lock, then inched the door open and peered out. No one. He was gone. I knew he might be hiding out of my view in another office, but I had to do something. I couldn't just hole up in an office for the next 14 or so hours. Knowing it was a risk, I bolted for the stairwell and raced down to my department. Felt safe there, as my workspace was in the code access controlled server room, and only my coworkers and I knew the combination needed to get in. Only one person was still in the basement, the woman who handled the help desk calls. I began to cry the second I saw her, and she frantically asked what was wrong. She held my hands as I told her what just happened, and she was the one who convinced me to report Andrew to HR. I knew that HR would be empty at that hour, so I sent an email rather than calling, and then I went home and became a little ball of tears, worry, anxiety, and horrified nausea. I called in sick the next day. The HR staff called me at home that afternoon, and I reiterated all that I had already told him in my email. How he had been kind of inappropriate from day one, and how things had escalated horribly. The HR director asked me to come in and write out a formal complaint form. I did. Because Andrew didn't work directly for the hospital itself, it was difficult for HR to handle this, I guess. They did contact the company he worked for, but he was not fired or even transferred to some other client site. He was given a tiny slap on the wrist and told never to come near me or attempt to communicate me with it in any way. I still had to see the bastard at work nearly every day, and I felt very unsafe when my tasks took me away from busy areas. This added to the stress of my job, and I began to suffer from stress-related medical problems like migraines, depression, and anxiety. I felt very unsupported and unprotected by HR too. About 18 months after that event, I quit that job. I am glad that there have been improvements in how employers handle harassment at workplace. That sort of behavior has no place here. I'm 23 and I've lived out in the country basically my whole life, so I never really thought twice about being out here alone. My nearest neighbor is about 1.5 miles down the road, and I'd grown up knowing their family, the Harlows, mom, dad, and 2 sons. The older one, Cade, was maybe 4 years older than me, and we've been friendly our whole lives, without ever being super close. We'd wave from our driveways or make small talk if we ran into each other into town. Nothing more than that. He was always perfectly normal as far as I knew. Quiet and kept to himself mostly. Worked on the family property. I had no reason to think anything of him. It started in early spring. I'd been out on my porch in the evening when I noticed a truck parked at the far end of my gravel road just sitting there. I didn't think much of it the first time. People turn around out here sometimes, but it happened again 2 nights later. Same spot and around the same time of evening, just sitting with the engine off. Couldn't see the driver from that distance, and I couldn't make out the plates clearly, but it was the same dark-colored truck both times. Third time I saw it, I walked down close enough to see it was Cade's truck. I recognized the busted side mirror he had since high school. By the time I got within 100 feet of it, it started up and pulled away without me ever seeing his face. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he was waiting on a phone call. Maybe he pulled over to rest. I genuinely bent over backwards trying to make it make sense because this was somebody I'd known my entire life and the alternative was uncomfortable in a way I didn't want to sit with. Then things around my property started feeling off. Small stuff at first, like my outdoor storage chest had been moved slightly, just enough that I noticed, or a chair on my back porch was facing a different direction than I left it. Once I even found a cigarette butt near my back fence line, and I don't smoke and never had visitors. I set up a cheap camera above my front door, mostly just to make myself feel better. Checked it one morning after feeling uneasy all night and found footage from around 2 in the morning. Cade walking slowly across the far edge of my front yard, stopping near the tree line, and just standing there facing the house for almost 4 minutes before walking back out of frame. I watched that clip probably 6 times. Each time it felt worse than the last. I drove over to the Harlow property the next morning. I don't entirely know what I was planning to say. I hadn't thought it through. His mother answered and I asked if Cade was around. She said he was out back and offered to get him. I told her it was fine and walked around the side of the house myself. He was splitting wood and looked up when he heard me coming. His expression didn't change much, just kind of settled into something neutral. I asked him straight out why he'd been on my property. He set the X down real slowly and he had no idea what I was talking about. Calm as anything. Said he hadn't been anywhere near my place. Said maybe I was seeing things being out there alone. Something about the way he said it made every hair on my body stand up. It wasn't defensive, not even dismissive really. It was just so completely unbothered that it felt practiced. I told him I had on camera, and his expression shifted then, just slightly. Something moved behind his eyes for a second before the neutral look came back. He said okay and picked the axe back up and went to splitting wood. Didn't say another word, just turned his back to me, like I'd already left. I went home and called the sheriff department. I sent them the footage and gave them everything I had. An officer came out that afternoon, looked around the property and took a report. He said he'd go have a conversation with Cade and see what came of it. That night, I made sure every door and window was locked and pushed a chair under the bedroom door handle. Around midnight, I woke up to my dog losing her mind at the back door. She was a shepherd mix and not a dog that barked at nothing. I lay completely still in bed and listened. Heard nothing at first. Then I heard footsteps on the back porch. The door handle moved. It turned as far as the lock would allow and held there for a moment before releasing. Then silence. Then footsteps moving off the porch and into the grass. I was on the phone with the dispatcher before the footsteps even faded. The officers came and found fresh boot prints in the mud along my back porch. They matched the ones near the fence line from before. Cade was brought in for questioning that night, and from what I eventually found out, he completely fell apart once they had him in a room and actually pushed back. He developed some kind of obsession that nobody around him had seen coming, or at least nobody admitted to seeing coming. His own family said they had no idea about. I moved off that property within the month. Stayed with my parents while I figured things out. I still live rural because it's all I know, and I trust my gut a whole lot faster than I used to. The door handle turning is the thing that stays with me. Like he actually thought it might just open. I'm 16 and this happened about 7 months ago and I still think about it almost every single day. I want to start by saying I was not being careless, and I want to say that because the first thing people do when they hear something like this is look for the part where you made the obvious mistake. The part where you should have known, and yeah, looking back there were signs, but in the moment every single one of them had a perfectly reasonable explanation, and I think that's what makes it so terrifying. It didn't feel like a horror story while it was happening. It felt completely normal right up until it didn't. It was a Tuesday night in early spring. I'd stay late after school for a study group that ran longer than expected, and by the time we wrapped up, it was almost 8 o'clock. My mom was supposed to pick me up, but she'd gotten stuck at work and was running about 40 minutes behind. I told her it was fine that I'd wait outside. I was sitting on the front steps of the school scrolling through my phone when a car pulled up to the curb. Dark blue sedan, nothing distinctive about it at all. The window rolled down and a man leaned over from the driver's seat and said my name. I looked up. He looked familiar immediately. I couldn't place him exactly in that first second, but I knew his face. Or I thought I did at least. He had that kind of look that could belong to a dozen different people. Medium build, maybe late 30s, with light brown hair. Completely ordinary. He smiled and said he was a friend of my uncle's, that my uncle had asked him to swing by and grab me since my mom was stuck. And here is where I want to be really precise because this part matters. My Uncle Darren and my mom talk constantly. He helps her out all the time, picking me up from things, dropping things off, whatever she needs. It was not even slightly unusual for him to send someone on his behalf if he was busy. It had happened before. Not with this specific person, but the concept was not foreign to me. I asked his name and he said it was Rick. He said my uncle would explain everything and that he was parked right there if I wanted to call my mom first. I did try to call her, but it went to voicemail, which also wasn't unusual because she works in a hospital and can't always pick up. I sent her a text saying a friend of Uncle Darren's was giving me a ride and got in the car. He pulled away from the school and for the first 2 or 3 minutes, everything was completely fine. He made small talk, asked how school was going, mentioned my uncle by name a couple more times, and seemed totally relaxed. I was on my phone, half paying attention. Then I noticed we weren't going the right way. My house is north of the school. We were heading south. I told myself maybe he was taking a different route, avoiding traffic or construction or something. I looked up from my phone and watched the streets going by. Nothing looked immediately wrong, but the direction was definitely wrong. I asked him where we were going, and he said he had to make a quick stop first and that it would only take a few minutes. Something in me shifted right then. Not panic yet, just a quiet wrongness settling somewhere in my chest. I asked him what kind of stop. He said he had to drop something off at a friend's place real quick and then he'd take me straight home. Texted my mom again and no response. Then I texted my Uncle Darren directly. Hey, did you send someone named Rick to pick me up? A few minutes went by. We turned off the main road onto a smaller one. Less lit, fewer houses. My uncle replied, What? No, who is this? My stomach dropped so fast I felt physically sick. I looked at the man driving and in that moment I understood completely that I did not know him. I had never known him. Whatever familiarity I thought I'd seen in his face when he pulled up had been something my brain constructed because he said the right words and I'd been staying in the dark and it all fit together just neatly enough. I did not let on anything that had changed. This is the part I'm most grateful for in hindsight because my instinct was to scream or to demand he stop the car, and I didn't do that. I just kept looking at my phone and kept my voice completely even and asked how much longer the stop was going to take because my mom was expecting me. He said, Not long. I told him I got car sick sometimes on smaller roads and asked if we could take the main road instead, just to see what he'd say. He said this way was faster. I texted my uncle back. The man picked me up from school saying you sent him. We're heading south on Greer Road, I think. I don't know him. Please call Mom and call the police. My hands were shaking so bad I had to retype it twice. I turned my face down on my leg so he couldn't see the screen light up if my uncle called back. Kept my breathing as steady as I could manage. I was looking at the door handle, looking at how fast we were going, running through every option I had and crossing them off one by one. Jumping from a moving car on a dark road felt worse than staying put. Screaming him felt like accelerate whatever this was. My best option was to stay calm and wait for a moment where the car slowed down or completely stopped. He turned onto an even smaller road. Gravel now, trees on both sides. I felt my phone vibrate against my leg and I didn't look. He slowed the car down and I didn't wait to find out why. The second the speed dropped enough, I pulled the door handle and shoved the door open and I jumped out. I hit the gravel hard and felt my palms and one knee tear open, but I was already running before I fully registered the pain. I ran into the tree line on the right side of the road and just kept going, crashing through brush in the dark. No idea where I was going, just away. I heard his car door open behind me, heard him call my name once, almost calm like he was mildly annoyed. Then I heard his footsteps on the gravel and I ran harder. I don't know how long I ran, it felt like a long time. I eventually came out on the other side of the trees onto a lit road and just started waving at the first set of headlights I saw. A woman in her 40s pulled over and I must have looked insane. Scraped up and hyperventilating, and she immediately told me to get in and lock the doors. My uncle had already called the police by then. My mom had seen my text and called them too. Officers were already looking for the car when the woman drove me to the nearest gas station and waited with me until they arrived. They found the car abandoned about 2 miles from where I jumped out. No sign of him. The plates came back to a vehicle reported stolen 3 weeks earlier. The description I gave led to some investigation, but as far as I know, he was never identified. Nobody could figure out how he knew my name, or knew I'd be standing outside the school that night, or knew enough about my family to mention my uncle convincingly. The last part is what keeps me up at night, more than anything. The rest of it I can almost rationalize. People do random terrible things, but he knew my name. He knew my uncle's name. He knew that my mom was supposed to pick me up and that she was running late. Somebody had been watching me for long enough to know all of this, and I have absolutely no idea who or for how long or why they just stopped at that. I don't wait outside alone anymore. Not for anything, literally. I don't get into cars without confirming everything through multiple people first. I know those sound like obvious things to say, but I promise you when somebody pulls up and says the right words and looks vaguely familiar and smiles at you like everything is completely normal, it is so much easier than you think to just believe them. But I got lucky. The car slowed down at the right moment and I was close enough to trees and I ran fast enough. I really try not to think about what would have happened if any of those things had been different. So this story takes place about 2 years ago. I was working graveyard in a small town casino in the cafe on Halloween night. I was dressed up as Hermione because I'm a huge Harry Potter fan and my work has a Halloween contest, so I thought I would put myself out there, which I never do, and get in on the fun. Now, my outfit was a skirt. That was short, but I had short leggings under it and a polo shirt and a tie, all Gryffindor themed. So I'm the cashier and it's about 2 a.m. We don't usually have many customers at this time, but since it's Halloween, we were busier than normal. So I'm just checking people out, doing my job, actually having a good time seeing everybody dressed up when this guy comes to the counter. I can immediately tell that he's drunk, super tall, past 6 foot tall, and really buff and bald. I remember his total was like $2.40. I don't know why I remember that, but I just do. Anyways, he had a $100 bill for me. I told him I had to get my manager to get change. He looks at me and goes, "No, this is for you. I'll pay for the coffee separately." Now as a cashier, we hardly ever get tips, but if somebody wants to tip you, they can. But no one has ever tipped me this much before, so I was like, not really sure if he was being serious. He then looks at me up and down and says, "It's for you to come to my room with me." I immediately hand the 100 bill back and say, "No, thank you." He takes out another 100 and throws them both at me and goes, "How about now?" Tell him no thank you again. Luckily, security was close by and saw what was going on. He came over and nicely asked the guy to pay for his coffee and leave. The guy looks at the security guard and says, "If she's going to dress like a whore, then she should act like one." At this point, I'm very close to tears. I've had my fair share of creepy guys in my life, but never like this. Never in my face like that. The security guy tells him to pay for his coffee and leave immediately or he'll be escorted out. The guy looks at me and says, "Okay, bitch, I'll wait for you on your side. You better meet me outside or else." I'm just standing there not really sure what to say or do because this guy was intimidating. The security guy tells him that this is a threat and calls the cops. The guy goes crazy and tries to hit the security guy, but he misses and the security guy pushes him to a wall and radios over to someone else to call the cops. So, Creep keeps looking over at me saying, "Why do all women act like this? At least I would have paid you, dummy," etc. And I'm sure you see the point. This all happened so quickly and escalated so quickly, and I felt like I barely had time to think. At this point, I'm crying and my coworkers take me to the back. The cops come in and arrest the guy. I guess he had punched a hole through the wall and tried to hit one of the cops. The police took my statement and I was allowed to leave early. The same security guy walked me to my car and I thanked him. Now, the messed up thing is apparently this guy was a huge spender at the casino and the casino didn't even press charges or 86 him or anything. I quit soon after. This is a little anticlimactic, but it gives me the creeps. At the time of writing, I am 16 female, and this happened from the time I was 9 till I was 14. When I was in primary school, 4 years old to 11, I had a best friend, Marie. Marie's parents were split up, and her father lives on the same street as me, while her mother lives a town over. She spent the week with her mom and the weekends with her father. I would often go to his house and play with Marie. We'd play hide and seek and pretend and other games like that. Marie wasn't exactly the best child, and her play fights left me with scratches and bruises. Her father spoiled her and always had sweets and money in the house. He was always on dating sites or Facebook and was an avid Arsenal fan, watching every single game. In the summer, if I were playing in the garden, I could hear him shouting at his TV because of a match outcome or goal. He would take me and Marie out and would buy us McDonald's and once a pillow pet because I wanted one so bad. I remember my mom being kind of weirded out when I said that Marie's dad bought it for me. He would take us swimming too, but I don't remember much of those trips. Marie's father was around 5'11", stocky and had ears that stuck out. He had a very kind smile and was soft-spoken with a very deep voice. I used to walk home from school and he would often wave out an upstairs bedroom window down at me. I would wave back and smile or say hi. The summer of me being 10, I was over at their house almost every weekend. But when I was 11, Marie moved with her mother to a seaside town and we went to a different secondary school. I lost touch with her and never really hung out with her again. I need to lay out how my route home is for this next bit to make sense, and I'm really sorry if it's confusing. My road is like an L shape, with the longer part being a shitty tarmac road and the shorter part being up a hill. The houses are like a T, with a row of terraced houses along the top of the hill and another row going down the hill along the road. The backs of the houses face the road and an alleyway leads around to the front of the houses, and I could also walk along this alley to get to my house. Whichever way I took my house, Marie's father would see me as he lived around halfway up the hill in the row of terraced houses that went down the hill next to the road. When I'm in my room at home, when the blind's up, I can see Marie's father's house. Let's call Marie's father Ken. Ken would open his window, lean out, and watch me from his window. It would take me a few minutes to notice him watching me, and as my bed was right next to the window, I would often be in pajamas or minimal clothing. I would wave or smile, and he would cheerfully wave back. I would close my blind and wait a couple minutes before opening it, and he would be gone. This happened multiple times. My mother put up a net curtain for me so that nobody could see me in my window. I changed my sheets at night and do it often in my underwear, so as my bed is in a weird position and changing sheets requires a lot of effort, I have to sit on my windowsill, so I would often have to remove the net curtain. I have no idea how many times he watched me contort and struggle to change my sheets, bearing in mind I was around 13 or 14 when I began noticing these things. I walk home from the bus stop the same way I'd walk home from primary school, and every single way I would take to walk home, Ken would always see me, would always wave hello and smile like he was expecting me or something. It creeped me the heck out, and I began to get scared to see him. My heart would race, and I began to completely ignore him as I speed walked home, earphones in my ears blasting music. I thought he was watching me, waiting for me every day. One day when I was 14, I tested my theory. There were two ways I could walk past Ken's house. Both would lead me home. The first way was the way I usually walked, along the tarmac road and up into my back garden. I passed the back of his house. However, from the bottom of the hill, I would be able to see his window and see if he was waiting there for me, and I could divert my route to go around the front of his house, along an alley, up the hill, and to my front door instead of my back. One day, I saw him in the window at the back of his house, and I tried to not give off that I knew he was watching me. Without stopping on my route, I diverted to walk up the alley in front of his house. He had crossed along the top floor of his house. When I reached his house, some way up the hill, he was looking down at me from the window at the front of his house. He was definitely watching. I power walked home and immediately dug up Marie's contact info. I told her to tell Ken to stop watching me walk home and that I thought it was creepy. She did so and told me Ken was only waiting for his girlfriend to get home and that he always watched for her. I can hear every car on my street pull up from my house, and I never heard any of the hour after I got home. I know Ken's girlfriend drives a BMW, and I know what it sounds like. Luckily, he stopped watching me after that, and I never really seen him again, so Ken, please stay away. I'm what I would most certainly call a creep magnet. I get weirdos all the time, and it's become a joke I share with my friends and coworkers, telling them of many so many creepers I've encountered in my time as a retail employee. I get all kinds of people in the store, and I'm known very well for my bright attitude and overly chipper way of being, which has come to be loved by my regulars and newcomers alike. It's more than likely a contributing factor in why I get so many weirdos. And my height. I'm very short, standing at 4'8" and looking about 5 years younger than my age at 21. I'm rather filled out for how young I look, so that's another reason as well. But on to the story. Today was like any other. Just another ordinary day working by myself in the store, checking out customers and stocking shelves in my moments away from the register. A normal day. At some point while on the register, I greeted a man with a long dark beard. that was bald and wearing glasses as he came through the door. He immediately smiled and got that surprised look on his face that I've come to know as the, "Oh shoot, I'm going to totally creep on this girl today" look. No big deal though, because I'm used to it and I know how to handle myself. Eventually, after about an hour or two of being on the register, I'd pretty much cleaned the store out of my customers and moved on to stocking candy. The man before with the beard approaches me with a smile and holds up a large white trash can. Excuse me." "Yeah," I reply, glancing up from the box I'm stocking. "Are there any more of these in the back? This one doesn't have a lid," he says, gesturing to the large trash can in hand. "Sure, I can check for you." I smile and I'm polite like I always am before turning away and heading toward the stockroom. I notice he's following me and think nothing of it, but glance down the aisles for any other customers as I walk, immediately taking note of the store's emptiness. Well, shit, I guess it's just us in the store, I think to myself. Moving through the stockroom door, I'm quickly relieved this guy stops at the entrance. "I'll be right back," I say as I make a turn around some old rolltainers, which, due to just receiving a truck, our stockroom is full of. They stand very tall and are like giant movable walls, but very heavy, mind you. Being so small, I don't have to move them much to make a path through and see what's on them. So only after a minute, I've made myself a little path, having 3 heavy ones on my right and left and in front of me. I decide to give up my search for trash cans. Sighing, I go to turn around and inform him of my defeat, only to find out he's in my tiny path of walls. A very tight squeeze for a man of his stature, standing directly behind me. "Find them?" No, I don't think we have any." I try to laugh and avoid acknowledging the creepy situation, but I am also very aware of the surroundings. I'm in a very small area with quote-unquote walls at the back side of me and sides towering over me and this very robust man standing in the way of my only exit, and a room very far from any customers with no cameras and no other employees in the store. I'm helpless and increasingly growing scared at how this man isn't letting me move out. I go to voice that I need to return to work after a solid minute goes by, but I'm not able to get out a single word before he gets in this creepy, almost shy voice. "You're just the cutest little thing. Did you know that?" Within an instant, I'm terrified and feel ill intentions from this guy. Oh my, this is how I die, I think. Surprising myself, though, I choke out without thinking. "I just heard my bell." "What?" He looks confused but doesn't budge. "I just heard my bell. There are people up front who need to be checked out and are looking for me." I stand nervously, knowing full well neither of us heard the familiar ching from the service bell I keep on the register. "But what about my trash can?" he asked, stepping forward but taking a glance back toward the trash can. And again, with lightning thinking, I blurt out, "I'll mark it down half the price. No big deal," laughing and trying to act like nothing is out of the ordinary. I slip by him, seeing my opening yet is turning around. I try my hardest to walk away, pretending to be calm as I exit the stockroom, then sprint to the front of the store the moment I am out of sight. He wound up leaving without purchasing the trash can. So, a little context to help the story flow. My parents got divorced when I was 10. Female, by the way. And my brother was 8. They had bought a lease on a fairly big land and decided to split it. The house was demolished and my mom was building a new house to live with me and my brother. We lived in a very small city that is known for its safety. Fast forward to when I was 15, now I'm 25 and the house still wasn't ready. I, my brother, and my mom lived in an apartment really close to where they were building the house, so we would check it from time to time. It was an evening when my mom and I were getting back from the market and decided to go check the house. As we were parking in front of the house, the car lights showed a man trying to jump the fence to get in. I was really freaked out, but my mom stepped out of the car and shouted to the man, "Hey, what the heck are you trying to do?" It was an old guy, maybe late 60s, pretty tall and skinny. He was starting to get bald for sure, having hair just on the sides of his head. He just sends really creepy vibes. He jumped over the fence and looked kind of scared. He wasn't expecting somebody to show up because nobody lived in that place yet. He said he lived in the apartment building next to the house and he was trying to cut down a branch from a tree that was knocking on his window. So my mom said he was trespassing, and if he wanted to do something in her house, he should have contacted her. She yelled at him to go away and never come back. We went home and never really talked about it. A few months later, my family finally moved into that house. It's a cute house with lots of trees and space for my dogs to run free. At that time we had 3. 2 small ones and a border collie we rescued. Every day we could hear a teenage female voice yelling at the apartment building next to our house. We figured it was just some teenage drama because we could hear her saying things like this to her parents. "I don't want to live here," or "You don't get me at all." So we never really did anything about it. Some time had passed and my best friend moved to an apartment in that building. She said that she could hear the teen yelling to her father. Guess who the father was? Yes, the man that was trying to get inside my yard. That creeped me out a little bit, but I didn't have proof that he was doing something to her. One evening, I was eating some fruit in front of my house with my dogs and I heard some screaming, like a man and a woman were fighting. I looked around and figured out it was coming from the building next to my house. As I looked at the building, I saw a woman falling from a balcony, but couldn't see if anyone had pushed her, so I called the ambulance, and they were really fast getting here and taking her to the hospital. At the same time, the police came and took a man that I couldn't get a good look to see if it was the same man that trespassed. I didn't get to know what happened that day and who was the man. My dad started building his house next to my mom's. I spent a lot of time at my best friend's apartment that was just by the creepy apartment. As I said, my yard was filled with trees and sometimes we could see animals there, like lizards, snakes, or foxes and possums. This day, I and my friend were on her balcony and could see a lizard walking on the wall that separated my house and the building. In the balcony next to hers, the creepy man showed up with a gun, trying to shoot the lizard. We started screaming for him, begging him to not kill the lizard. He looked at us surprised. I guess he thought he was alone. He said nothing and just went back to his apartment. I told my dad about it and he said I shouldn't interact with that man whatsoever. I was already 18 and things started to calm down. It was an afternoon, around 4 p.m. and I was home alone. I decided to go for a walk with my border collie dog. She's really sweet and I used to ride my bike as she followed me running. So I did that. As we were coming back to my house, just passing the building, that man threw a really big rock at my dog. She was running, so the rock hit her leg. I cursed him and got back at my house, looking at my dog to see if she was hurt. I told my mom and she said I should never walk alone. Some days later, I found a really cute but skinny cat at my college. I was sitting down smoking and this cat jumped in my lap. I came back to watch a class with him in my lap. He slept through the whole class. I came back home with him. He was orange and fierce, as he was a street cat before. We let him go for walks in my street. Everybody liked him. He was very friendly and asked for everyone to pet him. People let him in their houses and frequently sent my mom pictures of the cat in their yards or on their sofas, so we never thought he was bothering someone by walking around. At this time, we were forgetting about the violent nature of our neighbor. My family went on a trip to visit my grandma and my dad stayed to take care of our pets. He said one night he heard some footsteps around the house, but as he walked out the front door, he couldn't see anyone. He thought it was just the dogs messing around and went back to his house to sleep. When we came back, we realized one of the trees back at my mom's house was dying. It was a really big tree. I think it's 100 years old. This tree is the biggest one in the yard and it was always so beautiful. I should mention this is the tree that man was complaining about the first time we met him. So my dad went to look at that tree and figured out a lot of holes in it. He said it's a way to get poison inside the tree to kill it. He also said we shouldn't tell my mom because it was going to scare her and make her really sad because the trees were the main reason to buy that place, so I never told her about it. Some time passes and my brother and I move out to another town to finish our studies. I wanted to take the cat with me, but my mom said it was going to be hard for him to adapt to living in an apartment. He likes so much to walk around, so I agreed she should stay with him. A few days later, she visited me and said the cat had died. I was broken. How did this happen? She found him with his neck broken in front of the apartment building next to our house. His head was twisted, but my cat was still alive. But as she arrived at the vet, my cat was already dead. She said that she thinks it was the man that killed him. We don't have any proof of that, but you know that feeling when you just know it. I cried so much, and just writing about this makes me cry. He was my first cat and very sweet. My mom still lives in the same house. She has 5 cats now, but none of them go out. That man still lives next to her. I'm with her during quarantine and I see him all the time. He walks past our house, always looking up to see if somebody's in there. I'm 18 and I have been running my Instagram page for about 2 years now. Nothing massive, but enough followers that I get brand deals here and there and call it a real hobby. I post lifestyle stuff mostly, like outfit photos, coffee shop visits, that kind of thing. I never thought much about the kind of attention it could bring, but I do now. It started with comments. That's how it always starts, I guess. The username I didn't recognize. Something like a string of numbers started showing up under basically every photo I posted. At first, the comments were normal enough, compliments on my style and stuff like that, very easy to scroll past. But after a few weeks, they started getting more specific, commenting on the background of my photos or mentioning things I hadn't even noticed were visible. One time I posted a mirror selfie and the comment said he liked the street I lived on. I lived in an apartment on the 4th floor, couldn't see the street from that angle. I blocked the account. A new one appeared within 2 days. I told my mom and she told me to set my account to private. I did for about a week, but it tanked my engagement and I had a brand deal coming up that required public posting. I switched it back and told myself I'd just keep blocking it. His name, I eventually found out, was Daniel. He slipped up one day and commented from what appeared to be his real account before quickly deleting it. I screenshotted it first. I looked at his profile. It was mostly empty, but his name was right there. Daniel. No last name and no real profile photo. Just that. Around month 2, he found my other social media accounts, like my Twitter and TikTok and a Pinterest page I hadn't even touched in years. All of them started getting follows and messages from variations of the same username. I reported everything I could, but nothing really seemed to come of it. Platforms send you an automated email and then essentially do nothing. The comments shifted in month 3. They got possessive in a way that made my stomach turn, referring to me like he knew me, saying things like he'd been having a rough week and my posts were the only thing helping, asking why I hadn't posted in a few days like I owed him an explanation. I stopped responding to any comments entirely around this point, even from people I actually knew, just so I wouldn't accidentally engage with him. Then the direct messages started. Long ones, pages almost. I'd open Instagram in the morning and there would be a novel from a blocked account sitting in my message requests. I stopped reading them fully after the first couple. The parts I did see were enough. He talked about me like we were in a relationship, referenced inside jokes that we never actually had, mentioned places I'd been in my photos, and said he'd visited them after seeing my posts. My parents thought I was overreacting for a while. My dad said it was probably just some lonely teenager who got bored. My mom said the same things, that she always said about being more careful online. I don't think either of them understood how constant it was. I was home alone that night. It crossed into something I still can't fully process. My parents had gone to visit my grandparents for the weekend and I'd stayed home because I had things to post and didn't want to fall behind. It was a Saturday night and I was editing my photos at my desk with music on low. My apartment felt completely normal. My phone buzzed with a message request. I almost didn't open it, but something made me. It was from a new account. Same format as always, but instead of a long rambling message, it was just 3 words. Nice place though. I stared at it for a second and then looked up from my phone and around my room. My curtains were open. I always kept them open because I was on the 4th floor and had always felt like that was high enough that it didn't matter. I got up and went to the window and looked down at the street below. He was standing directly across my building looking up. I couldn't make out his face clearly from that distance, but I could still see someone. He wasn't hiding. He was just standing there completely still. I yanked the curtain shut and backed away from the window so fast, I knocked my desk chair over. I called my mom and she told me to call the police, which I did right after. While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, I got 3 more messages in a row. The first said he just wanted to talk. The second said I shouldn't have closed the curtains. The third was a photo. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. It was taken from outside and below, angled upward. It was my window. My curtains were still open in the photo, which meant they had been taken before I closed them, obviously. Before I even knew he was there. He had been standing there long enough to take a photo and send it before I'd even noticed him. Officers came within about 10 minutes. They checked the street and the building entrance and the surrounding area. He was long gone. I showed them everything, of course. Every screenshot I'd saved over the past 3 months. Messages, comments, and photos that he sent. One of the officers told me I'd done the right thing by documenting everything, and that was enough to actually move forward. They connected me with a detective the following week. A restraining order was filed. Daniel was identified and located. He was 26, lived about 40 minutes away from me, and had no prior record. When officers spoke to him, he apparently acted completely confused, like none of it was a big deal. Like showing up outside a stranger's apartment, building at night, photograph or window was just something that happened. The restraining order went through. I don't know exactly where he is now, and honestly that still bothers me more than anything. A piece of paper doesn't feel like a lot of protection when somebody has already shown you they're willing to stand in the street and stare up at your window in the dark. I ended up moving a few months later. New city, a new apartment. I switched my Instagram to private permanently, and I'm a lot more careful about what's visible in the background of anything I post. No reflections, no windows, nothing that could place me anywhere specific. Some people say I let him win by changing the way I live. Maybe, but I sleep better now, and that has to count for something. I still think about that photo sometimes, the angle of it and how long he must have been staying there before I looked down. The fact that I had been sitting at that desk for hours completely unaware. I really tried not to think about what he was waiting for. I was at the gas station and went up to the register to buy gas and some drinks as I was going on a small road trip. I got there and there was a large man with a ginger beard with the name tag Guy. I smiled at him and was polite since I work customer service and try to be nice to everyone because you never know what kind of day said person might be having. Guy smiled at me and asked if we met before. I had never seen him in my life and I made a joke saying, "I just have one of those faces," and laughed it off. I had alarm bells ring in my head because of his tone. I had a deep sinking feeling in my gut as he took his time checking me out. Guy kept talking to me, saying I looked great today, and he guessed my dead name. My dead name that I haven't told anyone in years, and as a non-binary person, I hate people knowing. I try my best, and I keep that name a secret. Plus, I was paying with cash, so I couldn't think of a way that he would know. I smiled more to brush it off, trying to imply that wasn't my actual name, saying, "No, I go by Royal." He frowned and scratched his beard, and I could have sworn I saw bloody dandruff or something like that come down on the counter. I took my change and went out to my car, filling it up as quickly as I could. I pulled out my phone with the intent to let others know my location and just tell my friends and my mom. Feeling hot breath on my neck and someone's body pressed up against my back, I spun around and there was Guy. The most nasty smell hit my nose as he looked down at me. I'm about 5'6", and my best guess is that he was 6 foot. Guy smiled. Multiple of his teeth had been missing. He said I was rude for talking about him behind his back. I laughed it off and apologized. I went to quickly get the gas pump out of the car. Before I could even get my hand on it, Guy grabbed it from me and did it for me, smirking and saying that I shouldn't bother doing such manly things. He went to explain that he finally knew where he knew me from, explained that I was a sex slave in a past life, that he was my master, and that he knew my name from anywhere. I'm 17, by the way, and I've never met this dude in my life. I nodded and tried to laugh it off, saying, "Oh, really?" because I didn't want to anger him. The man didn't seem to be happy with that as I tried to go around and get into my car. He opened the passenger door to get it. I was in full panic mode and had started my car and put the pedal to the metal with both doors swinging open. As I drove away, a guy had fallen to the ground and started to scream and curse. I pulled over after a mile and shut both of them. I recently found this subreddit and thought it would be the perfect place to share a frightening stalker experience I had when I was in college. This was particularly traumatizing for me as I had just started to recover from 8 years of abuse from the ages of 5 and 13 at the hands of my aunt's husband. This happened back in 2012. I had recently graduated from high school and was attending community college to save some money. In October, I was hired as a team member at Chick-fil-A located about 3 minutes from my house. In the same plaza, there were other businesses, including a Burlington coat factory my mom and I would occasionally shop at. I worked from 5:30 a.m. to 2 p.m., and in the weeks following, I started to get to know some of the early morning regulars whom we would serve frequently. Most of them were very kind, just stopping by for their morning caffeine fix. One of the regulars we had was a pair of gentlemen that would stop a couple times a week in the morning together. One of them was older and polite, and the other was a short, balding man that always gave me the creeps when he came in. His name was Esteban. After a while, I started to notice that he would come in more frequently by himself and only order a small black coffee. On one visit, while I was at the register, he mentioned that he worked at the Burlington in the plaza. He was very casual when he threw in the idea that it looked very familiar to him and he must have seen me shopping there. He offered up his personal discount if I ever wanted something special. Although I found his comment a little disconcerting, it wasn't all too out of the ordinary for someone to recognize a customer elsewhere, especially since both businesses were in the same plaza. Or so I thought. I continued to serve him his coffee with a small smile and push it out of my mind, but decided to avoid shopping at Burlington from then on. As the months passed, Esteban continued to come in almost every morning. Some of my coworkers started to tease me about my quote-unquote boyfriend who would come in and ask for me specifically by name. When I wasn't there, he would be rather upset and wouldn't order anything they said. After I heard those comments, I began to feel very uneasy. My mom does not drive, and one afternoon she asked me to take her to Burlington to shop for some gifts as she was flying to visit family back home in Honduras. She usually managed to find a good bargain there. I felt my stomach knot. I silently hoped and prayed on our quick drive that Esteban would be nowhere in sight. As we looked through the racks, my mom decided to go her own way and we eventually separated. While I looked through the junior section, I had a gnawing feeling that somebody was watching me. Each time I would look over my shoulder, there was nobody there. I was feeling very silly until I needed to use the restroom. I walked down past the sheets and comforters to the small dingy hallway leading to the restrooms, with no one else in sight. As I exited after doing my business and rounded the corner, I froze. Esteban was not so conspicuously organizing some comforter sets about 10 feet in front of me with his back half turned. I had seen him, but I was sure he hadn't caught a glimpse of me yet. I quickly darted in the opposite direction to avoid any interaction with him, and hurried back to my mom. She was ready to check out, and we left. I had 2 days of class after that incident, and after leaving class early one day, I decided to stop by the mall on my way home to pick up a birthday gift for my dad. As I walked toward the JCPenney I was there to shop at, I happened to look up from my phone and realized Esteban was leaning up against the railing directly ahead of me, watching intently as I walked closer, stalking me with his eyes like prey. I averted my gaze and made a beeline for Victoria's Secret just a few feet past him. I thought there was no possible way he could have followed me there, but I was wrong. Esteban pushed off from the railing and trailed me through the store. I stopped to look through some items and watched him from the corner of my eye. He was toying with a pair of lacy panties, waiting to make sure, and watching that I didn't leave his sight. That's when it dawned on me. This man had followed me, from campus to the mall. He knew I had already left early and had tracked me the entire time. I picked something absent-mindedly, trying to push down the paralyzing fear I felt, and headed to the register. He followed suit, but was cut off by another customer who managed to get in line behind me before he caught up. Since there were line dividers in place, he couldn't leave the line. I paid hastily and bolted out of the store, running as fast as I could away from Victoria's Secret, and hid for over an hour in the Sears on the opposite end of the mall. I was terrified of leaving and finding him outside another store. I finally picked up enough courage to tell an associate what happened, and he offered to call security. The security guard escorted me back to my car, and I drove home staring into my rearview mirror for any sign that he could be following. I had to work the next morning, and without missing a beat, Esteban came in for his morning coffee. He was not happy. His face was contorted into a dark, angry scowl. Luckily, I was filling our ice buckets in the kitchen area behind the counter. I could see him through the small window in the door, craning his neck over the registers, trying to see me, muttering under his breath. I felt hot tears welling up in my eyes, and I slid down the hall to the floor. My morning manager, my now husband, noticed my distress and came over to me, asking if I was feeling well. But I couldn't hold it any longer. Through childlike cries, I unloaded on him everything that had happened with Esteban over the past few months. He looked very concerned and told me to wait in the office while he made a call. When he came back some time later, the restaurant owner was with him. They had called the police and made it very clear to Esteban that he wasn't welcome in the restaurant any longer due to several complaints of harassment from multiple female employees. He tried to come in a few times after that and was met with my husband at the door telling him very forcefully to leave or he would call the cops. With the help of the officer that responded, I followed the restraining order against him and have not seen him since then. We still live in the same area, and I absolutely refuse to shop at the Burlington where he worked. I'm 25, female, by the way. For some backstory, when I was about 15, I met this guy who would eventually become one of my best friends. Dave. Dave and I had loads of mutual friends, so we saw each other a lot. Now, he is a gay man, but when we first met, he was so deep in the closet, he could find Narnia. When I was 16, one of our mutual friends threw a Halloween party, and Dave brought the guy who would eventually become my long-term boyfriend. We'll call him Alan. Now, he and Alan met their sophomore year of high school and had been best friends ever since. Alan has known Dave was gay since they've met. I knew Dave was gay because I've seen his porn collection. Yet it took another year and a half after Alan and I started dating for him to come out of the closet. We were happy he finally felt comfortable enough to come out. Not long after that is when Dave met his first boyfriend, and that is where our story begins. I believe that Dave and this guy met while on a camping trip. Well, this guy, who we'll be calling Jimmy, was a few years older than us, like around 25 at this time. Dave and Alan were both 20 and I was 18 and had just graduated high school. This entire story takes place from May to July 2012. Dave and Jimmy had been dating only like 2 weeks before I got to meet him. Dave drove up to my parents' condo with Jimmy in the car to pick me up. We were going to get lunch together. Well, I wasn't ready yet, so I told him to come upstairs for a minute while I finished my makeup. Dave had been there plenty of times and knew which unit was my parents'. They came in and I finished up, and about 10 minutes later, we were off. That lunch was good and Jimmy seemed nice. And after lunch, Dave dropped me back off at home because I had somewhere to be in the morning and didn't want to be out late. About 2 hours later, I'm in my room watching TV with my dog when my mother pops her head and asks if I know a guy named Jimmy. Turns out he was at the front door asking for me. Dave had dropped him off at the library, which was like 2 blocks away from my home, because he wanted to check Facebook while Dave went and ran some errands. He had gotten bored of that and walked to my house to see if I wanted to hang out. My mom lets him in and we go to my room. Then he proceeds to lie across my bed like it's just his and talk to me. So much for my TV show. I text Dave and tell him where Jimmy is and that he should come and get him because I have things to do tomorrow and I need to be asleep at a good time. Now it takes Dave about 45 minutes to show up, and during that time, Jimmy is just lying across my bed asking me about myself. No red flags are going off at this point really, but I'm just annoyed because I was enjoying my evening watching TV. Eventually Dave shows up, but before Jimmy leaves, he asks for my cell number. I give it to him and he leaves. Then the next few days go by uneventfully, but then I get messaged by Jimmy. He states that he thinks I'm really cool and wants to hang out with me. I tell him that Alan and I hang out with Dave a lot, so he'll probably see a lot of me. He then states that he would like to hang out with it just being the 2 of us. I would prefer us to hang out alone sometimes so we can get to know each other more, he said. Something along the lines of what he sent me. Now, this is when red flags start to go off. He keeps getting more and more pushy, and eventually when I message one of my friends and tell her about what's going on, she then comes over and reads the messages and starts sending him random shit from my phone to get him to leave me alone. Which worked, but only for a while. Now, I'm still not sure how this happened, but Jimmy had lost his place to live and needed somewhere to go, so he moved in with Alan and his roommate at the time. Dave still lived at home, and he hadn't come out to his parents yet, so Jimmy couldn't move in with him. It's a small 2-bedroom apartment, but they managed to fit a second full-size mattress into Alan's room on the floor, and that is where Jimmy slept. Except Dave was constantly over there, so it was Alan, Jimmy, and Dave all sleeping in one room. So now his room was always occupied by Jimmy and Dave, so Alan and I never got much time to be alone together, which was fine. They made good company. Until Dave wasn't around. Jimmy was an absolute horrible roommate. He never cleaned up after himself and never contributed to the food in the fridge. He didn't even have a car, so Dave drove him everywhere. It was a good thing that Alan's roommate was never home and didn't give 2 shits as long as nobody entered his room and rent was paid on time. However, Alan and I were getting tired of his stuff, but we put up with him because we both cared about Dave, and Dave was in love with this guy. After the text thing, I tried to ignore Jimmy, but every chance he got, he tried to talk to me, which I tried to ignore as politely as I could. I never did tell Dave or Alan about the text because I didn't want to start drama. He would flirt with me and give me hugs that were too long and put his hands on my shoulders or legs while sitting down. I usually pushed him off and moved away from him. Not long after this started, he started asking me things like, "How long have you and Alan been together? Kinda seems like a jerk. Are you happy with him?" Which made me uncomfortable. Alan and I don't do PDA because we think it's unnecessary, and he treats me like a human being instead of a damn flower, so no, he's not up my ass holding me every chance he gets. But then Jimmy took it a step too far. This was a few weeks after he moved in. I was sleeping in Alan's bed when we had finally gotten some alone time that afternoon and did what most hormonal young adults do. Afterwards, I was tired and wanted to nap, so put on a tank top and my underwear and curled up under the blanket. Alan decided to let me sleep for a while, and afternoon turned into evening, and Jimmy was now there. Alan was in the living room with his roommate, and Jimmy decided that it would be a good idea to spend some of that alone time with me while I was sleeping and in my underwear. Now I had felt a warm body press against my back, and I was still out of it and figured it was Alan. A while later, I heard aloud, "WTF are you doing?" and woke up. It wasn't Alan spooning me as I slept, it was Jimmy. He had taken off his shirt, lifted the blankets, and crawled into Alan's bed and cuddled me while I was asleep. Alan was obviously furious, and Jimmy insisted that it was harmless and he wasn't doing anything wrong, while I was mortified and creeped out beyond belief. Afterwards, I came to Alan and showed him the text, which he then told Dave about. Dave refused to believe that Jimmy would do something like this. Then I started getting texts from Jimmy again. He said he was sorry if I took his actions the wrong way, and he sent me something like, "You remind me of somebody, like a girlfriend from a past life. I just want to be closer to you." After this, Jimmy got kicked out of the apartment and Dave was pissed, but Alan refused to put up with this shit anymore. Dave dated him for about another month. After they broke up, he apologized to us and now doesn't talk about him except to call him a piece of crap. I and Alan are still together to this day, and we're both close to Dave, so close to the point his mother invites us to family functions. Dave has moved on, came out to his parents, and has had a wonderful boyfriend for the past 4 years. This one also has never tried to spoon me. I had forgotten all about this until last year when I went to Walmart with my dad one day. We were there to get something, but he wanted to check the price of ammo for his 9mm while we were there. Turns out Jimmy now works in the sporting goods section at the local Walmart. He tried to make eye contact with me while he checked the prices of ammo for my dad. After leaving, my dad mentioned how he noticed that guy looking at me. Just called him a creep and left it at that. I've never been more thankful to leave a Walmart. I started working my current summer part-time job last spring. I am situated in a large old building that used to be a country club but fell into disrepair about 10 years ago. Although there's nothing paranormal about my story, it is maybe worth mentioning that the former manager died in the main office upstairs when they went out of business. It adds to the unsettling quality of this place. Along with that, so do the seemingly never-ending hallways and passages, innumerable hidey holes and half-empty pools, and other strange unused parts of the building, like a secret shower room and sauna and a tunnel of storage areas that connect the men's and women's bathrooms. There's also a lot of doors to the outside in this place. Makes sense for a country club, but currently we only use one small door for the golf course check-in, the kitchen, and one dining room for the restaurant upstairs, and the small cafe area for early morning golfers to get their coffee and beer. The cafe area is where I work. In the summer, we clock in to open the cafe before 6 a.m., often before the sun comes up. The golf course people come in shortly after, but I would be the first person in the building every morning. I would unlock the front door, disarm the alarm, walk downstairs in the dark, unlock this cage that keeps the drunks at the bar upstairs at night from wandering downstairs, and crawl along a long dark hallway with no windows to get to the light switch at the end of the hall. This always creeps me out, and I end up holding my keys between my fingers like brass knuckles. I'm a woman in my mid-20s, and I've lived in plenty of bad neighborhoods, and ninja sliding down the walls on the opposite side of whatever doorway is coming up, just because it's pitch black and I'm a scaredy bear. By the time I get to the end of the hall and flip the light on, my heart is always pounding out of my chest as I struggle to find the right key to let me in the cafe. The whole situation started when Tim, a golf course employee, mentioned that he kept shutting the door between the men's locker room and bathroom and the storage area that leads to the women's, and every time he would go back in there, it would be open again. This, along with some strange noises, was odd for the bar regulars upstairs to claim. That this place was haunted by the old manager and whomever else they say died within these halls. Travis, a co-worker in the cafe, also mentioned that a few minutes after he opened, he went into the men's locker room and noticed that it was steamy and smelled like soap. So he went to the shower room to investigate, and everything was sopping wet and still hot. He was the only person who was supposed to be there at that time of day, but he didn't see anyone, so he let it go. A couple of months later, Tim noticed this weird side door that you had to climb up a rickety old staircase to reach on the side of the building, and it wasn't shutting correctly. He fixed it and locked correctly, and he didn't think anything more. Shortly after, somebody from the golf course came over to tell me that they found someone's entire life packed away in one of their hundreds of lockers that nobody uses, and they thought somebody was living in the storage room between the men's and women's bathrooms. He must have been coming in before the golf course people set the alarms when they left in the evenings, and leaving after the cafe person, me, would come in and turn off the alarm in the morning. So that means that every morning, as I blindly shuffled my way down that long dark hallway alone, one of those pitch black doorways actually did have someone hiding behind it. A few days later, a red-faced, angry, bald man in a Vietnam-era army issue glasses came into the cafe and started screaming, puffing and flailing his arms around, yelling about his stuff getting thrown out. He went over to berate the golf course people, so they asked him about the contents of the locker. His answers about specific items led them to realize this was the man who was secretly living in one of this building's many dark passageways. I never found out much about him, whether he was dangerous or just homeless, but watching him scream about this stuff made it clear that he wasn't 100% rational. I still work there and do a dark shuffle down the hall every morning when I work, and although they say everything is up on the up, with the alarms and the doors locking, it still creeps me the heck out. There have been some other creepy things that have happened in this place recently to make me think this isn't all over with, which I will post separately if anyone is interested.